There we go. Okay. I always say that, and when I listen to it, the first words are, there we go. They miss all the prelude. Well, Kim and I watched Casablanca last night. We do that. It's one of our favorite movies. We do that once a year or so when we can. And there's a song in Casablanca, As Time Goes By. And we watched some of the background stuff that comes with the DVD, and they pointed out that As Time Goes By wasn't much of a song popularity-wise until after Casablanca. And now it's, you hear the classics sung by various people, and that's usually one of them. So what we're going to talk about today is music. It's very important to God, as we'll discover here. And it's not just the fact that Nehemiah 27 through 47 emphasizes it, but the whole Bible does. It's one of those things like when God tells us he loves the smell of roasting meat, oftentimes in the Old Testament. Well, here and in other passages, he's telling us he loves music that lifts him up. So, without any further ado, let's get into today's word. Last week, we took a break from the effective chronology that was laid out for us by the compiler of Ezra and Nehemiah to look at the various lists that have been presented in those two books. I haven't read those lists. It would be mostly a tedious exercise for both of us. Me trying to pronounce the names and you trying to sit through it and maintain your attention span. Well, I've gone through the material before and after the lists as if they weren't there. But they are there. And they are very important to God. God validates these lists and gives them vital importance by making sure they were included in his word. So, don't take them lightly. It's a reminder, these lists, that God pays attention to every detail of our lives, each and every one of us. This is the area of Jerusalem in Nehemiah's day. I know it's hard to read. All those red boxes represent gates and the names of gates, many of which are named in today's verses. God is into the details, especially in each and one of our personal lives. Last week, I prayed at the end in an illustration that popped up to me on Friday, and today I wanted to repeat that because it is such a good illustration of last week's lesson. In my closing prayer, I prayed for Scott Hamilton. Many of us, all of us, have some aspect of ourselves that we're not crazy about. God gave us this aspect, and yet we see it as a burden rather than a blessing. In my case, one of them, I have many, but one of them is a lazy eye, my left eye. I've never seen clearly from here over all my life. Even with corrected vision, a lazy eye cannot be turned into clarity unless this new technology that's too expensive for me to experiment with, but they have contacts now that might, I'd be able to see clearly out of my left eye for the first time in my life. But anyway, God gave me this left eye. And one of the main applications I can apply to it is when I was a young man just starting off at my career after college, I was unhappy with where I was and decided I'll try for the LAPD. So I went through the physical test, I went through the interview, I went through the psychological test, I went through everything, passed with flying colors. And literally they said, there's the gate toward the academy, walk on through, up, but first you have to do an eye test. And literally, on the path to entering the academy, they gave me an eye test, which I failed miserably because my left eye just wasn't up to snuff. They didn't allow corrected vision. Even if they did, I probably would not have passed. But imagine how different my life would have been had I been a police officer, especially in L.A. Well, God didn't want that, obviously. He gives us challenges for a reason. And sometimes he reserves the explanation of that reason until we get to heaven and can see him face to face. Scott Hamilton's challenge was that he was short. always small in stature, and that led him into skating. Became a 1984 Olympic gold medalist, in addition to other accolades he collected because of his skating. His short stature, which led to ridicule and other problems growing up, led him into skating, which defined his life. In 2004, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And the doctor said, you've had this brain tumor all your life. In fact, it's butting up against the growth part of your brain and has led to your stunted growth. And so Scott's wife, pictured there, prayed for him. And right there, he accepted the Lord as his personal Savior. And in doing so, recognized that brain tumor was what led him into skating, which is why God gave it to him in the first place. Where would I be without skating, he asked himself, praising God for that direction, even though it came through a brain tumor. So, I know each and every one of you can give an example of your own. And I pray that you'll see the blessing of God in that. So, with that, let's resume our study of chapter 12, verses 27 through 47. As soon as we advance here, there we go. Nehemiah 12, verses 27 through 47. Now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites from all their places to bring them to Jerusalem so that they might celebrate the dedication with gladness, with hymns of thanksgiving, and with songs to the accompaniment of cymbals, harps, and lyres. So the sons of the singers were assembled from the district around Jerusalem and from the villages of the Netophathites, from Beth Gilgal, and from their fields in Geba and Asmaveth. For the singers had built themselves villages around Jerusalem. The priests and Levites purified themselves. They also purified the people, the gates, and the wall. Then I had the leaders of Judah come up on top of the wall, and I appointed 2 great choirs, the first proceeding to the right on top of the wall toward the refuse gate. Hoshea and half of the leaders of Judah followed them, with Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, Jeremiah, and some of the sons of the priests with trumpets, and Zechariah, the son of Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, the son of Mattaniah, he son of Micaiah, he son of Zakur, and son of Asaph, and his kinsmen, Shemaiah, Azarel, Meliah, Galiah, Mai, Nethel, Judah, and Hanani, with the musical instruments of David, the man of God. And Ezra, the scribe, went before them. And the fountain gate, when they directly up the steps of the city of David by the stairway of the wall above the house of David to the water gate on the east. The second choir proceeded to the left, while I followed them with half the people on the wall, above the tower of furnaces, to the broad wall, and above the gate of Ephraim, by the old gate, by the fish gate, the tower of Hananel, and the tower of the 100, as far as the sheep gate, and they stopped at the gate of the guard. Then the 2 choirs took their stand in the house of God. So did I and half the officials with me, and the priests, Eliakim, Maaseiah, Miniamin, Micaiah, Elionai, Zechariah, and Hananiah, with the trumpets, and Maaseiah, Shemaiah, Eleazar, Uzi, Jehohanan, Malchishua, you see it, Elam and Ezer. And the singers sang with Jezrahiah, their leader. And on that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced because God had given them a great joy. Even the women and children rejoiced, so that the joy of Jerusalem was heard from afar. On that day, men were also appointed over the chambers for the stores, the contributions, the first fruits, and the tithes, to gather into them from the fields of the cities the portions required by the law for the priests and the Levites. For Judah rejoiced over the priests and Levites who served, for they performed the worship of their God and the service of purification, together with the singers and the gatekeepers, in accordance with the command of David and of his son Solomon. For the days of David and Asaph in ancient times, there were leaders of the singers, songs of praise and hymns of thanksgiving to God. So all Israel in the days of Zerubbabel and Nehemiah gave the portions due the singers and the gatekeepers as each day required, and set apart the consecrated portions for the Levites, and the Levites set apart the consecrated portion for the sons of Aaron. So today's verses basically give us one picture. The people of Israel, after all the struggle building the wall and separating themselves from the outside world, are thanking God officially to show their gratitude, and they dedicated the wall, and they dedicated it with purification and with music. Now, with the purification, we're not sure what form that took. Purification is often done with washings, which probably had something to do with the process. Rituals, sprinklings, sacrifices, fasting, and even sexual abstinence were part of purification processes in the Jewish culture. And we don't know which or how many of those were involved with the wall. However, we do have great detail on the way they celebrated musically. Now remember, the wall is 4 stories tall, and 8 feet wide. That's the yellow bar in the picture that you're looking at. Again, all the gates are there. OSHA would have had a field day with this, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Can you imagine thousands of people walking on a wall 4 stories tall, 8 feet wide, dancing and singing around the 2.5-mile perimeter? Nehemiah, as you can see here, started here at the Tower of Ovens and went clockwise to the Tower of the Guard. Then they got down off the wall and to the temple. Ezra started here by the Dung Gate in the south corner of the property and went this way along the wall to the Water Gate, and then they got down and off and went to the temple where they met and did more singing. So that was the path described by Nehemiah in what I just read to you in fairly decent detail. You can see from the map, these areas here are not covered specifically with people walking on them, perhaps because they didn't trust that part of the wall for thousands of people to walk over it, or because it just became convenient to disembark where they did and rally in the temple. Nehemiah went clockwise, Ezra counterclockwise. And while they were walking around, they were singing so loudly that they could be heard for miles around. The Temple Mount is on a mount and can be seen for miles around from all the people that Tobiah and other enemies of Nehemiah, Sanballat and Geshem, they had rallied enemies of Jerusalem from all around. And can you imagine, as thousands of people are walking around the temple walls singing and making all sorts of noise with musical instruments, imagine all the people who were able to hear and see that after they had openly opposed the project. So integral into the celebration was not just the singing, not just the joy, but the movement, the dancing that no doubt took place, the musical instruments, all part of the celebration that dedicated the wall. While I studied this passage, which really is fairly simple, it's the main message is God likes music. God likes to be celebrated with the talents that he's given various people. And I looked at some other examples.